We've all had bad dates, right? This is the only date I've had to date that rang every alarm bell and waved every red flag. I'll preface this by saying I don't go on many dates, but when I do, I make sure I follow safety protocol by only meeting my date in public places, let either family or friends know where I'm going, and park in a populated place close by to wherever we meet. Anyway, this date initially suggested we meet at his house to watch a movie and have a few drinks, and I said no, I don't feel comfortable with that, and I only want to meet in public. He seemed okay with this, but then brought it up a few more times, and I said if money is an issue, we could meet up another time or forget about it altogether. But my date backtracked and went with my idea of meeting at a cafe I chose that I was familiar with and equidistant to where we both lived. Anyway, he turns up in a two-door car. This detail is relevant, and goes into the cafe, and I follow behind and introduce myself. After a polite introduction, things begin to get weird. I order a Coke, and he says, "Don't you want a drink?" I was going to pop into bar, which is connected to the cafe, and get one. I say no, I'm not drinking, and he looks at me like WTF, as if I'm being unreasonable. I already explained in messages I don't drink, as I'm on medication, so having to re-explain it again pissed me off. He seems disappointed and goes to order a cider from the bar while I get a table. Anyway, we sit down with our drinks, and date immediately goes on about going back to his place again, even though the original plan was to stay here and order food, and I already stated that was not happening. He says something along the lines of having a few drinks and eating at his place, and I said we don't have to eat, we can just have our drinks and leave. He gets defensive and says he has money, but prefers it if we go back to his. I make a joke and say, "You're not a killer, are you?" And instead of laughing it off, he stares at me uncannily and says, "You don't think I would hurt you, do you?" I laugh uncomfortably and say of course not, but really I'm relieved this date won't be going any further. Date suddenly says, "Are you going to follow me in your car, because that wouldn't make sense? How about we go in my car, but I've got packages in the front, so you'll have to squeeze in the back, and I'll drop you back off to your car after." In reality, that made less sense than me following him in my own car and then driving home from the table. A few moments later, I see him through the cafe window getting into his car and driving off. Massive bullet dodged, in my opinion. Also, the fact his car didn't have back doors made it even more sinister, because imagine if something happened in the car and I couldn't escape? TLDR, creepy date kept wanting me to go back to his house, and when I kept saying no, he finally noped out like the creep he is. I reported him on the dating app. Back in my single days, I often tried online dating apps. I talked with this one guy in particular. For the sake of the story, I'll call him Tom. Tom and I started chatting after we matched, and it went well, so we progressed to talking over the phone. He had a nice voice, and I liked that he could carry on a conversation because I always feel sort of awkward with talking to people, and I have the problem of running out of things to say. My mind will draw a complete blank when I'm nervous. So having him talking to me on the other end of the line was a nice relief. After some successful phone conversations, we went on a couple of dates in person that were surprisingly very pleasant. We met up at public venues, a couple of restaurants. We both had a background in English, and he was also a writer like me, so it was nice to have these interests in common. Our conversations were easy, in-depth with a nice flow. I invited him to a function in my community where he introduced himself to my neighbors, friends, and family. They kind of looked at me questioningly like, "Is this your new boyfriend?" Raising their eyebrows. I told them no, that we were just friends who were still getting to know each other. It felt too soon for me to call him my boyfriend. But Tom said something different, telling everyone that I was in fact his girlfriend. I had to keep correcting him. I felt a little embarrassed, and I regretted bringing him to the gathering. Overall, we really only dated. I used the term loosely for about 3 weeks before things started to get really weird. Tom was increasing his number of text messages and wanting to spend a lot more time with me, asking to see me almost every single day. At first, I thought this was flattering. I enjoy the attention and the feeling of being wanted. But at some point, I'm not exactly sure when, it escalated to a really uncomfortable level. I remember just feeling smothered. He'd blow up my phone, asking me what I was doing. But it didn't seem like he was asking in a normal "how are you" kind of way. There was a controlling undertone to the question. When I answered, he'd want to know every detail about where I was, what I was doing, what time I was doing it at, etc. I considered that maybe he was just feeling insecure and that he would calm down with some time. On our next outing, I met up with him and my friend so we could go out to a bar and hang out. At some point, though, my friend wanted to leave because she wasn't feeling good. We said goodbye to Tom, and I left the bar to take her home. When I checked my phone after arriving home late that same night, I saw that I had a bunch of angry text messages from Tom about, "Why didn't you kiss me goodbye?" And things like, "You don't really like me, do you?" I wrote back saying, "I just had to take my friend home. I didn't know I was supposed to kiss you. Kissing me shouldn't be an obligation. Sorry, I just didn't think about it 'cause I was occupied. Can we let this go? I am tired and I want to go to bed now." He said, "Okay, you're right. I'm sorry. Please don't ghost me, okay?" Or something along those lines. I didn't know why, but I just felt really weird and that he was too clingy. And it worsened from here. Moving forward, whenever I talked to him, it seemed like he would be deliberately trying to initiate an argument or a fight. I'm not the confrontational type, and this was incredibly energy draining for me to keep up with. "Why does everything have to be an argument?" I asked him. He explained how he grew up in an abusive household, and he was used to the members of his family fighting and arguing all the time. This felt normal to him. I explained, "Well, I'm not used to this, and frankly it feels a little scary to me. People in my family talk things out calmly when we have disagreements. We don't raise our voices, jump to accusations, or have temper tantrums." "You're right," he said. But of course, this did not change. I lost the spark. That initial attraction I had for Tom was gone. I actually felt repelled by him now. I decided I just couldn't see him anymore. I felt really sad and guilty for his life situation and the way he grew up, but at the same time, the roller coaster dynamic of our communication was really starting to take a toll on my own mental health. When I broke up with him, he threatened to commit suicide. I didn't know what to do, so I asked my parents and some of my old psychology course classmates for advice. Everyone advised me that Tom's mental instability wasn't my responsibility and that he needed to go seek help. He kept flooding me with messages on all my accounts. As mentioned before, he was a writer, so he'd send beautifully written, lengthy pleas for forgiveness. I replied with, "I really just need a break right now," but he ignored my wishes and would keep trying. At one point, he sent me a photo of his dog, telling me his dog says, "Hi, I miss you." That's when I thought, okay, this is weird and manipulative, so I'm going to block him. And I did. I blocked him on everything. Phone numbers, social media accounts, etc. When he couldn't reach me, he resorted to some drastic measures. He emailed my parents. Yes, my parents. Why is he messaging us? My parents asked me. This feels weird and creepy. I don't know, I said honestly. He's pleading us to convince you to get back with him. I don't want to be involved in this, my mom said. I don't want you involved either, I said. My parents knew the whole ordeal already because I'd asked for their advice when he had threatened suicide. So while having a discussion about it, our consensus was to offer no response. They proceeded to block him as well. Next, it was my friend who had gone with us to the bar. Tom is messaging me, saying that you broke his heart or something? She informed me. What happened? Did you do something to him? I broke up with him. Don't respond. Just block him, I said. She obliged. But that wasn't the end of it. Then Tom reached out to my neighbors. I guess he remembered their names at that community function and memorized them all by heart. He reached out to each one of them with a lengthy, elaborate story about how we had been together for at least 6 months and that we were passionately and madly in love. In this story, he portrayed himself as some kind of victim, like I was this villainous man-eater or something weird. I don't know, because I didn't want to read it. What did you do to this poor guy? I kept being asked over and over again by different neighbors. I was forced to keep repeating an explanation about what happened. We only went out for about a few weeks, I said. A month at the most. I advised them to please not respond or encourage him. Honestly, I'm a very private person, so having my whole community know about my situation was deeply humiliating for me. This went on for about a year. I'd have someone tell me. Tom tried to reach out to me again. There was one older lady neighbor of mine that actually continued talking to Tom over email, even though I asked her to stop. She said, "But he writes so beautifully and he's a beautiful, dark soul." The whole thing put a rift between her and her husband. So that was a thing. A separate neighbor told me she was afraid for my personal safety. She said, "He seems like a stalker type like from those crime shows," which didn't do much to help my anxiety. I'm going to tell you about my dating experience with a government agent. Or was he? Not only will this post focus on bizarre events, but also what the relationship was like. I haven't been able to understand what happened, and I feel like I need more insight. So that's why I'm doing this. When I tell family and friends, they're just as puzzled. I'm a 23-year-old gay guy. I'm from Michigan. I just deliver pizza and live at home with my parents. I have no affiliation with the government. A few years ago, I met an older guy online. He was here in Michigan visiting friends from Washington, D.C. He was nice, and we decided to hang out after chatting for a little while. I wasn't looking for anything serious, so when we hung out it was casual. We would just have wine or get dinner. Sometimes alone, other times with his friends who live here in my area. The first thing that stuck out about him was when he told me what he does. He told me he works for a 3-letter agency, but he could not disclose which it was. All I knew was that his job is very demanding, and it was for some 3-letter agency in DC. Nothing felt weird at that point, until the magnet popped up. It's honestly hard to remember this in detail, so bear with me. I don't remember the first time seeing it, but I know that one day I noticed a small circular magnet just sitting by us. It looked like a metal washer. Just a donut metal-shaped disc about the size of a pepperoni.
But it was thick and shiny.
I remember seeing a few of them around, and even being stacked on each other. I can only remember what it looked like. I didn't say much about it at first. I kept my mouth shut when it came to anything possibly involving his work. I regret that now because it makes me feel like I was being vulnerable and naive. I wanted to impress him by respecting the private nature of his job. But in my gut, I knew it was connected to his work somehow. I didn't know it at the time, but that weird metal thing would come back in conversation later. As our relationship, if you can even call it that, it was more like a fling, went on, he started to show more of his personality to me. I began to feel an energy of manipulation when I was with him, and I just felt intruded on. He was very sweet and doted on me, but it felt too good to be true. Tension began to rise very quickly, because I wasn't giving him enough of my time, and I began pulling away. He was coming on too strong. It almost gave me a feeling of being captured. The more our strange dynamic played out, he began to tell me a little about work, slowly intertwining it with other aspects of his life. I don't remember why or when, but at some point he told me about the magnet. Harry's the best way I can explain this. Because of his job, he has foreign entities who literally try to mess with and interfere with his life. When you read that, you probably aren't completely understanding what I mean. Apparently, there was some sort of foreign entity that would use advanced technology to send some sort of disrupting wave of energy to him to distort his thoughts and emotions. I don't know how severe this was, but apparently it was very hard for him to cope with. I had never heard of anything like this prior. Please share what you know if you're familiar with what I'm talking about. He told me the metal object's purpose was to block that interference from affecting us. This was a lot to digest. I didn't know what to think. WTF? Foreign entities using mind control on him? Now I'm going to make a list of the weirdest parts and why I still rack my brain about this encounter to this day. One day, the magnet was stuck to my phone. I pulled it off and ignored it. I never found out which agency he worked for, and I wonder if it was an illusion of grandeur looking back now. He had a friend in Florida who was a lady in probably her 60s. He told me he stayed with her during the pandemic. When he FaceTimed her one day, she picked up a small object with a screen on it and asked if it was his. When he said yes, she quickly hid it. Also, he had a lot of weird, flashy technology I've never seen before. 3. If the foreign technology shit is real, did it affect me? Can it cause cancer face with tears of joy? 4. He ended up showing a very strange and manipulative side of himself, insisting I should have invited him to dinner with my family at Christmas, even though we had just met. 5. The one time we hung out in a hotel, he told me he was stepping out briefly and was gone for almost 4 hours. 6. He told me his ex-boyfriend was found slaughtered after begging him not to go out one night, but the boyfriend insisted. He told me the name and said I could look it up, but at the time I regrettably just didn't for some reason. So, I don't have the information about the incident or person. These 6 points creep me out when I look at them together, which I'm leaving open to your interpretation. The fling came to an end when I didn't give him enough of my time, and then he refused to see me again. His manipulative side became very visible when he would blow me off just to hit me with a "miss you" text. He became so manipulative after initially being so loving. Red flag? Thinking back to the last time I saw him, I'm glad I got out safe. We were at an Airbnb and he started crying, but I didn't. It was so weird. He was the one crying but then blew me off. When I asked why he was crying that night, it was because he felt so worried for what this would do to me. What was he thinking would happen to me? Probably just manipulation, but it just was really strange, and thinking back it felt like I was with a truly weird person, and I was not safe in that moment. Nothing bad happened, but my gut just tells me it wasn't right. I wonder what the magnet truly was, and why he wanted to make things serious so fast. I really am curious who that person was and his true intentions. So that's all I wanted to share. If you have had a similar experience or any questions, please let me know and I'll be happy to respond. If you can help bring some understanding to the situation, that would be great, but I understand how loaded this post is. I had gotten out of an 8-year abusive relationship and met someone on a popular online dating app. To be honest, I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to go watch a movie or have a drink with every now and then. I had 2 boys and was happy and living a peaceful life on my own after going through hell. So I meet this guy who is just a couple years older than me, and he had turned his life around. When he was younger, he used to be in gangs and drugs, and now he was into working out and staying really fit and doing family stuff. I guess you can say I felt protected by him. He was a hard worker, self-sufficient, had a son, and he loved going to the gym every day. I myself had kind of a crazy past, but overcame, and so we seemed like a good fit. We would go to dinner, movies, normal dating stuff, but he eventually wanted to spend more and more time together, and I was having trouble giving up all my free time for him, and he would get angry about this. Like, really angry. After being with a controlling, possessive asshole for so long, this was obviously a red flag, and after 3 months, I told him I didn't want to see him anymore. He said he needed to confess something to me. He admitted to me that he was using steroids, and that was the reason for his mood swings. He cried and said he was sure that was the reason, and was willing to stop if it meant he could have another chance, and I obliged, but only under the condition that we remain friends. Things were okay for a while. We saw each other maybe every other week, and he started wanting to see me every week, to which I told him that I was not interested in being anything other than friends at the moment, since I was not ready for a relationship. He tried to talk me into giving him another chance, but I just didn't find myself interested in him a romantic way, and so I insisted that we just be friends. I stopped talking to him because I got mad at his insistence that we still talk every day, since he said that's what friends do. He would always ask about my whereabouts and ask for pictures of who I was hanging out with, and I told him that this is not what friends do, and he just insisted that he just innocently wanted to see what I was up to. Fast forward 6 months later, and I hadn't spoken to him at all within that time. I was happy and living my life, and on one particular night when my youngest son was at his dad's, I went out to a local bar with friends. My oldest son, who was 13 at the time, was home alone, so I left a little early to make it home around 10 p.m. I lay down in bed and go to sleep. So a little info on my living situation. I had been living in my condo for almost a year now, and we lived in a great, safe community, and I would leave my patio sliding glass door open, screen closed, to get a breeze in at night, no biggie. My bedroom was close to the patio, and my son would sleep in the loft that was closest to the front door. I'm dead asleep when I suddenly feel someone slowly sit on my bed. I'm laying in bed wondering why my son would come sit on my bed so slowly. He wouldn't. I turn around, and it's not him. It's Mario, not his real name, laying down in bed next to me. I sit up and ask him how he got in.
He's not answering me.
He says, I needed to talk to you. I said, okay. When you need to talk to someone, you don't sneak into someone's room. You call them, you leave a note for them, literally anything but this. I'm thinking I'm gonna kill my kid for letting him in. He said, I didn't have your number anymore. I needed to talk to you before it's too late. I didn't even entertain the before it's too late bit because I was livid, but something told me to keep my cool. I sit up and say, look, I really want to talk to you too, but not like this. Please just leave, and I promise we will talk tomorrow. Call me tomorrow. He gets up and walks over to my side of the bed and starts rubbing my shoulders and is slowly making his way to my neck. He says, "Do you really want to talk?" I look him in the eyes and say, "Yes. I've been wanting to talk to you, but not like this. Please call me tomorrow." He stares at me while rubbing my neck and goes down to my shoulders and lets go. Says, "Okay." This motherfucker proceeds to exit through my patio door and jumps my patio wall, which tells me that is exactly how he got in. I freak the fuck out, check on my kid. He had no idea what was going on, locked all my doors, and I don't sleep the rest of the night. The next day I text him and I tell him that if I ever see him near me or in my complex, I will call the police and to never contact me again. If you're wondering why I didn't call the cops to begin with, I knew he had a gun, so I was scared of being retaliated against for being a snitch, and B, I figure if I called the cops they would probably not do much or just let him out, and I was afraid of what he would do after the fact. Either way, he left me alone, and I didn't hear from him for years. For years later, I'm going through Facebook and I see his face in People You May Know. I click on the picture and notice that it looks like a jail picture, those pictures where the guy is clearly in a jail cell. I scroll down the page, and his most recent post is him posting his address for his family members to write to. A prison address. So I Google his name, and sure enough, articles after articles, all with the same headline: "Man arrested on suspicion of killing girlfriend." About 2 years after him and I dated, he shot and killed the girl he was dating. That could have been me. And I feel like shit thinking if there was anything I could have done to stop him. Even scarier thought is that he only got 12 years for her murder.